Over the years, I've made a lot of force cubes and a lot of barrels. So the obvious question is, why have I never made force barrels? Well, for one thing, the barrels that I've made have all been stickered puzzles, whereas force cubes obviously require stickerless puzzles, so that's not going to work. But even if you were to buy some stickerless barrels, and yes, they do exist, making force cubes out of them still wouldn't be possible because the colors are not evenly arranged around the puzzle. Even if you buy 100 stickerless barrels, when you go to make, say, the yellow force cube, all you're going to have is 100 of these flat yellow sides. You're never going to get any of the curvy pieces in yellow, so it's impossible to ever make a solid colored force cube. At least, I thought it was impossible until I discovered the Ready Cube barrel. As you can see, this is a stickerless barrel where the colors are arranged a little bit differently from normal. Now, just to brag a little bit, the Ready Cube was released by MoYu in 2017. It's a very simple cube to solve intuitively, kind of like a Pyraminx. Now, because I ended up with 2 of them somehow, I immediately turned my other one into a barrel. Then guess what? About a year later in 2018, MoYu comes out with the Ready Cube barrel. So it's nice to know that mine has always been the original. But comparing these two puzzles, you can tell that MoYu's version is a little bit different from a traditional barrel. Instead of having separate flat white and yellow sides, we now just have 4 colors evenly arranged around the puzzle. And remember, evenly arranged colors is exactly what we wanted in order to make force cubes. In fact, they've already done the hard work for us by making sure that every piece is a solid color. That means we can just take the cube apart and swap the pieces around, rather than actually having to take apart the individual pieces, separating the edges into 2 halves, the corners into 3 parts, like we'd normally have to do. So somehow this has gone from force barrels are impossible to probably being the easiest set of force cubes that I'll ever make. Now, of course, because this puzzle has 4 colors, we're going to need 4 of them to make force cubes out of, so I went ahead and bought 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now it looks like they also make these same puzzles in a transparent version. I'm personally not going to be making transparent force barrels, but it sounds like a pretty cool idea if anyone wants to steal it. Anyway, let's go ahead and get these opened up. Okay, now step 1 of making force cubes is to take everything apart. I believe it's pretty easy to just pop out an edge, kind of like this, and there we go. Now it looks like we also have caps on these corner pieces, which come off to reveal a screw. So what we have to do is pop out all the edges, which should be pretty easy, and then unscrew all the corners, which is gonna take a while. Let's go ahead and start the time lapse. All right, here is everything disassembled. I very quickly realized that all of those screws would be much more of a pain than I expected, so I brought out a bit more of a powerful screwdriver. This thing is very unwieldy, but it makes things go a little bit faster. Now, one of the most common questions that I get on these videos is, if it's such a big pain to remove some of these pieces, then why take everything apart when you could just leave like all the yellow pieces on one core, all the red pieces on another core, etc. And that way you can save yourself about a quarter of the work by not removing and then re-adding the same pieces, right? Well, yeah, you're completely right about that. The only reason that I don't do it that way is because it looks way cooler in the time lapse if you take everything completely apart. So with that being said, let's go ahead and begin the self-inflicted redundant work of putting everything back together in force cube form. Let's go ahead and start the time lapse. And here are the finished force barrels. The easiest force cubes to make, I said, before I realized I had to deal with 32 separate screws. Right off the bat, they look really nice. Looking up close, it's almost bizarre how smooth the pieces are, with no gaps where you've assembled the stickerless pieces together. I guess they're really clean looking that way, because the pieces really were designed to be just one color. But another cool thing about force barrels is, because you took a 6-sided cube and turned it into a barrel shape, that means you can actually scramble it up because the puzzle will shapeshift. That's actually pretty unusual among force cubes. The only other ones that I found that work this way are the Morphix force cubes that I made. Now, unfortunately, I just realized that I never actually solved the original Ready barrel with the 4 colors on it, so I have no idea how hard this will be in comparison. Probably a little bit easier, but I think that's probably scrambled enough. Let's go ahead and try and solve it. So it looks like we have a few pieces already lined up right here. Let's go ahead and add maybe an edge piece like that. There we go. Okay, so this is an interesting conundrum. This edge piece can never actually go into this slot because, as you can see, it's backwards. The curvy part's up here and the flat part's right here. And because there's no way to flip around an edge piece on a Ready cube, this piece just cannot go there. So how about this other one? This one doesn't fit either. So we just have to look for another edge on the cube that maybe will fit. So this one looks like it is the correct direction. Now onto the other layer. Let's try and get these curvy edges in like this relative to the corners. So there's one of them. The next one can be maybe like this. And there we go, that's the fourth one right there. And now it looks like we just have these two edge pieces flipped like this, which is a case I kind of recognize from the normal ready cube. I think you just have to do this, 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 and this. And there we go. The ready barrel is solved. Now, of course, on the original 4-colored version, you'd also have to worry about putting the correct colors into the correct spots, so it would be basically about as difficult as a normal ready cube. In a way, I think the Force Cube version is almost a little bit less intuitive because there's no colors, there's nothing telling you where to put each piece. You kind of just have to figure it out based on shape. But once you know how to do it, it is definitely easier and faster to do than a normal ready cube or a normal ready barrel. But instead of just stopping here with the 4 solid color barrels, you guys all know that my new favorite thing to do with Force Cubes is to take 2 of them and swap the pieces around into some fun pattern like this checkerboard. Now, of course, what we had originally with the 4 colors swirling around the barrel kind of was a Force Cube piece swap mod to begin with, and we kind of just undid it to make the original Force Cubes. But I think there's definitely more fun patterns to explore. Unfortunately, a lot of those require unscrewing, say, half the corners from this cube and half the corners from this cube, and then making a half blue, half green barrel. That'd look pretty cool. But I think I've had enough of the screwdriver for now, so instead, let's just do the obvious mod of swapping around all the edges between 2 cubes to make a sort of checkerboard pattern. So let's get started. Ta-da! Now these are some cool looking Force Cubes. There's something about the fact that these cubes don't have any centers that just makes it look really interesting, especially on these 2 sides. I guess if you're looking just at the curved sides, it looks more like a normal checkerboard pattern where no 2 pieces of the same color are touching, whereas these 2 opposite sides where they are touching, it just makes it look very unique. Of course, these are still going to end up scrambling up and solving in exactly the same way as I showed you before, because even if you do manage to swap around, say, 2 of the edges, it's still going to look exactly the same. I don't have any great ideas of ways to swap around the pieces that would make them more difficult to solve, but I do have one more idea that I think might look even more interesting. Basically, I'm just going to swap around all of these central edges back to their original colors, and I think that'll result in some cool looking stripes going down the puzzle, while still having this plus pattern on either side. So let's go ahead and try it. Okay, I think this is probably my favorite pattern yet. It's multicolored, but not too chaotic. You have the stripes, you have the pluses, it just looks really cool. So even though these still don't solve any differently, I would still like to scramble them up because I have a feeling they might look pretty interesting now that we have multiple different colors of edges. Now the different colors of edges are still different shapes, so again, it's not like it's gonna solve any different, but yeah, I'm really liking how chaotic these things are looking. That looks very nice scrambled up. But yeah, those are some basic patterns that I came up with. I'm sure you can come up with some better ones. But anyway, these are the world's first Force barrels, at least that I know of. And I hope you all enjoyed the process of making them, because that's pretty much it. And I'll see you guys next time.